my mother tells me, I know 2 years ago Benghazi was a lot in the news when there was the Arab Spring or whatever in Libya. And my mother said that almost the first word I could say was Benghazi, because people used to say, "Where's your daddy?" And I said, "Benghazi." So he was in North Africa. And then he assembled around him, I don't know how he managed to do it, or if he heard of a poet or a painter or this or that, he would manage to persuade the commander of the British commander of his unit to bring them to his unit. And so it was quite a lively cultural life. And there was a professor, somebody who became professor of psychology in the Hebrew University, Cohen Raz. He was in another unit. He was the secretary of the commander, and suddenly they get a telegram. He has to move 3 days drive to Benghazi, near whatever where my father's unit was, because he heard he's a very good pianist. He was trained by Schoenberg and so on. Okay, so so the commander said, "Oh well, we'll ignore it because you're really I want you here." And then came from the head of the commander in the forces, so he has to move. He came, so that my father had a accompanist when he was singing. He had a very good singing baritone voice, and so he got that, and he made Passover, Pesach was all the British High Command came. It was a big thing. Anyway, the invasion to Italy, this unit was in the front because they had to lay mines or clear and build bridges and so on. So they were sort of, and another friend of my father told me that every millimeter was calculated on the boat taking the forces across the sea to Italy. And my father managed to smuggle a piano into this boat. It was hidden in something, a crate. And in fact, when they reached the other end, it fell, and suddenly you can hear all the strings, whatever. Anyway, as they were advancing up the, going north with the troop, they started to find Jewish children, hidden in villages, whatever. And they found, well, eventually, as it's in the book, they found a derelict house in Piazza Torre, and they housed these children there. And I think 2 young women came from the Milano Jewish community to help with the children. And the unit just, the food, blankets, all came from there. Whatever they had, it wasn't supported by anybody. And then in the summer, I think that's in one of my father's letters, this was after Italy was liberated. There was the Jewish community in Milano did a summer camp for the Jewish children. And there were already some children from Eastern Europe that somehow managed to arrive in Milano, and they were sent with this group to the camp. And I think my father was somehow involved in it. I'm not sure exactly how, but at the end of the summer, I don't know how long they were there, the kids went home, but what to do with these orphans? So they found this Piazza Torre, and then the head of the Jewish community, I think in Milano, put him in touch with Luigi Gorini, who was a scientist but an anti-fascist, and he was, I think, in charge, from the interim government, in charge of fascist property, and he gave Sciesopoli to my father. At the time, Anna Maria, his future wife, was his PhD student. Luigi was married, actually, with 2 children already. And of course, they couldn't divorce in Italy at the time, so Selvino was a place where they could go nobody knew, and so they used to come a lot. And my parents, Luigi, became very good friends. Now, my parents wanted to obviously to be together, and my father wanted my mother to come and help because she was a trained nursery school teacher, and she used to run the nursery in the kibbutz. But it was complicated. It took about 6 months, but eventually she got permission to leave, to go into it's all military things still. So anyway, so my mother and I went from Haifa on a boat to Napoli, and there were quite a lot of Bericha agents who were on this particular boat, so quite a lot of Israelis. Mm-hmm. I was the only child there, and I haven't seen my father for probably more than 2 years when he was in Italy. I mean, in North Africa he came, I think, twice to visit, and afterwards we didn't see him. So my father was a picture, on the sideboard, and we, the whole time we said, we're going to see Daddy, we're going to see Daddy, sort of thing. And I remember vaguely, I remember there was some meeting. My father came down to Napoli, and there was a meeting, I don't know if it was Habricha or whatever, and I remember sitting under the table and pinching everybody's trousers. I was 4.5 or so. And but when we got to Cervino, my daddy was everybody's daddy, so it was very difficult for me, in fact, at the beginning, because my parents didn't want to show special treatment for me, because all the others were orphans. So my mother looked after the youngest children. There was a group of maybe 20 children who were below 12. Everybody over the age of 12 was in big dormitories. There were 2 big dormitories, one for girls, one for boys. And we were the little ones. So there was Vovka Partisan, who was born in the camps. There was Rivka. My father gave everybody Hebrew names, so everybody, whatever the names, they got a Hebrew name. And she was in a convent. She became a Catholic. Well, she thought, that. I don't know. She was Italian. I don't know how long she was there, and but somehow she turned, And I remember going with her next to Cervino on the mountain, and there were everywhere there were little sort of piles of stones with a cross on the top. I don't know if it was like somebody was buried there, or I don't know, but they were around. And she said, you have to do that and spit. So I did that, spit. And then later on I went to visit Gary Bertini's mother, who was in Milano studying medicine, and she stayed with an Italian family with 2 boys, more or less my age, and they took me to the cathedral on Sunday morning, the cathedral in Milano, and there was some priest going with sort of like a basket, almost like a butterfly nets to put money, and as they went by, I was spitting. But I don't think they saw. Anyway, in fact, this family, because outside the cathedral there was a big market with all sorts of trinkets and stuff, and they wanted to buy me a chain with a cross. Well, I really wanted the chain back, was very cross. So I said, no, I don't want it. Anyway, I remember this was a bit later when I was about 5.5, maybe 6. But that's it. We came to Milano. It was to Cervino. I mean, it was I remember going up. So you go up from the hairpin road to Salvino and then Sciesopoli, and of course the gate for me looked very, very tall, and there was the ladders on both sides, and then was a walkway. You could walk at the top of the gate, and I once fell from the top down to the bottom. But we everybody ate. The dining room was communal for everybody, and we had our own little table. Our group had our own table, and I was a very bad eater. And at that time, I can't remember if it's in the book or not, but there wasn't a lot of food and there wasn't a lot of anything. So if you didn't eat, you had a little plaster put on the plate with your name, and it arrived the next meal you had to finish. And I used to sit and put the food from one side and the other. And in the end, it was too late, and they said, "Oh, just go," sort of thing. But and in the morning, every morning, there was a big parade. Everybody used to stand. It was divided into groups, more or less age groups, and our group was Group Vav, number 6. You know, we'd all stand according to the group. There was they would bring up the flag, and there was exercises, you know, to do it about 6 o'clock in the morning, I think it was. And I remember once I wanted to say something to my father, so I went to pull his trousers so he can look at me, and he sent me away in great disgrace in front of the whole thing, and I didn't speak for a week. I was so upset. But I still stayed with my, and I used to suck my thumb, my two fingers like in my mouth. And one of the teachers, he said, every night he used to come to the bedtime before we went to bed, because I didn't sleep with my parents, and he brought me a little roll, and he said, every time you feel like sucking your thumb, you bite the roll, and he cured me of that. That was fun. And the children, well, they did everything. There was a caretaker, an Italian caretaker and his family. 3 children lived there. What was his name? Paolo? No, what was his name now? And he had some chickens, ducks, a pig. Everything was in their little flat at the bottom of the building. And the house was amazing. It was we had everything was marble, swimming pool, cinema, lots of classrooms. The children, of course, studied, and some of them for the first time had teachers. The teachers were, some of them came from Israel, mostly from kibbutzim, to teach and help. Others were themselves Holocaust survivors who used to teach in Jewish school before the war. And the children had, you know, there was drama, there were choir, there was crafts, art, craft, art. The vocational education had several classes there, and they brought all the machinery for making shoemaking, I don't know, different crafts. My mother taught handicrafts and embroidery, things like that. And the grounds was wonderful. There was a big park behind the house, and could get lost there, play hide and seek. It was wonderful. But the cinema was very big. Well, it looked big to me. I was small, but it was big. And the projection was on the back wall, which had the white sheet, sort of the whole thing. And one time, I was playing hide and seek with some friends, and they were cleaning the sheet or something. And behind the sheet was a huge mural, the whole wall, enormous wall, of soldiers with machine guns and so on, and they look as if they're sort of shooting at you. And I was so frightened. I must have been about maybe 5. I ran away, and I refused to go to see films. I just refused. So for a long time, they used to bring film, I don't know, once a week or something, and I wouldn't go. And well, one time there was a film, a nature film, I can't remember exactly what it was, and my father literally forced me to go. And I remember hanging on to the banister. I didn't want to go. Literally, he was pulling me from, and I liked that film, so afterwards it was okay. But this memory of this awful pictures that the fascists did, because it was built by Mussolini for his youth movement, and the train there. I really was very affected by it.
In fact, before it was a barrack for the Balillas, the young youngsters.
Yeah, the youth movement,
youngsters,
the fascist youth movement. Yeah.
Yes, in order to teach them the honor, the war. And
exactly. So that was the picture, behind that screen. There was, they're all in uniform, and they all had machine gun, bayonets, that sort of thing. And some of them were sort of like facing the... and I got so frightened I wouldn't go, because I thought behind this screen was this horrible, these awful people.
Real.
So I didn't go. Now, we had, for example, we had a boy in my group called Nando, and my father called him Daniel, but he was not Jewish. His mother was a widow. His father died in war, I think. And he came to Slovenia. I don't know how he came there, but he came. And then most of the children, there were so many things. That winter was the coldest winter in Europe, I think. And I remember we used to go to Salvino, to the village, because the house was completely separate. It was isolated at the time. Now the village sort of grew, but it was isolated. So you had to go to the village, maybe a kilometer, I don't know how long. And a lot of the children used to go to have photographs, and we used to go just to have fun in the village. We used to go in a group. But I remember that winter, there was, I don't know, I think it was a 2 meter, they used to have to carve the snow to make the path to the village. And to me it looked like, and it certainly was very high. It was a lot of, it was very cold. They didn't have a lot of fuel. But the children worked they worked in the kitchen, they worked in the cleaning and washing and everything. And of course they worked in shifts, and they studied half the day and whatever. And they had their own magazine, their own newspaper, which was a lot of it in Hebrew, although some of them just learned Hebrew, because some of them came from assimilated families. And there were groups. Now, one group of Salvino graduate was already in Palestine when we left. And this is a group that founded Kibbutz Eilim in the Negev. And we met some of them before we left. There was another group, I remember, I may even have a photograph somewhere. Another group went when we were still there, went later, of the older kids. And this was the one that went to a camp near the sea to wait for a ship to take them to Palestine. But because they were trained in Salvino, and they always had Shabbat and all the festivals and so on, and they organized all the smaller children in the camp. So the camp commanders were not interested in letting them go, because they kept all the kids busy. So every boat they said, you'll be on the next one, and you'll be on the next one. And in the end they sort of rebelled, and they went on the Sfina Loa, which is described in the book. Now the commander of the Oloa was in the army with my father, and later he became a very, very well-known. He was a pacifist and very dovish member of the Knesset. He built a few new areas in Israel, in the Negev, and one wonderful Lov Eliab, wonderful man. He was the commander of the Sfina Oloa, and they went as an extras, and they were caught in Haifa and sent to Cyprus, unfortunately, this group. And then when the State of Israel was founded, the rest of the children were. And in fact, Nando refused to go back to his mother. They called him Danny, but he went with the children to Israel.
And his mother, where was
The kibbutz? Kibbutz Menara in the north. I don't know where he met married. But again, maybe Oleg. Did you get a letter that I written to Miriam about Oleg? Yeah. So Oleg will have the list probably, but Oleg was with the older ones. So a lot of the children I knew came after Oleg, and he kept in touch with his group. But I think there was probably a register of all the Slovene children, so maybe he's there as well, I don't know. And there were a few other, there was a brother and sister that the father suddenly came, and it was not long before, all the children went to Israel, and he wanted to emigrate to South America, and they literally had to pull them by the hair.
How long did you stay in Slovenia?
Until December 48.
That means
But most of the children left in May, June 48, and then there was a group of staff that stayed to, clear the place, finish, whatever.
And you?
I stayed until the end, and we went to. And my brother was born in Italy. He was born in Milano in December 47, and of course he came with us. My sister was born after we went back to the kibbutz. So we went back to the kibbutz when we came back. But there were two other children of staff that were more or less my age. And we, at the end, all the other children left, and my mother actually taught me like first grade at home, because then I moved to live with my parents, because the children all went. My group was dispersed. And so toward the end I lived with my parents, and we had a little room at the top of the building, and there was it was 2 rooms and a bathroom, and the anteroom, the smaller room, was occupied by another member of this Palestinian unit called Teddy Berry. Teddy was a real wonderful character. So he lived there. So in order to get into my parents' room, we had to go through his room. And Gary Bertini, Gary was born in Bessarabia, and his parents lived in Paris, but she wanted him to be born with our family, so they went from Paris to Bessarabia, and he was born there. His father was a Hebrew poet and teacher, and he called himself Bertini after his wife, whose name was Berta, so he called himself Aaron Bertini. But he had another name, but he changed his name. That's why Gary has a sort of Italian-sounding name. And during the war, they were separated. His father went to the Russian side, and because he was a Zionist, he was imprisoned in Siberia. His mother, I don't know where she was, and Gary joined the Russian army because the Russian liberated that part wherever they lived, and he spoke several languages, so he was a linguist, so they took him as a translator because he could speak French and Romanian and German and Hebrew and I don't know, I think at least 5 languages. And also he used to play the violin and he played the accordion as well, so he used to play. We have a picture of him in this Russian uniform with his accordion. Anyway, somehow Abricha managed to get his father out of Gulag or something in Siberia, and his mother at that time already continued. She studied medicine, but she didn't finish, so she continued in Milano. So she lived in Milano, and Gary again. We heard that, well, of course, he spoke Hebrew and he was a musician, so my father persuaded him to, instead of going to Palestine or to Israel, Palestine, he was still before the state of it, to come to Selvino. And he was wonderful, and the children, all the girls especially, adored him. He was 19 then, or 18, 19. He was teach them literature, philosophy, everything, he was wonderful. They all, adored him. And of course, all the festival that they did, Shabbat and all the festival in a big dining room, it was always decorated. There were sort of big sayings from Chazal or something on the walls, and my mother and Gary used to choreograph some dances as well. We did, for example, I don't know if you know Fantasia, that Walt Disney did Fantasia. So they did from the music. They did. And there was a dance of the. They took like the mushrooms and little dwarfs. So I was a dwarf, and we were danced around the thing. There was the dance of the flower, and they choreographed. They did that. Every festival there was a play. Hanukkah there was a play, and it was similar to what people did in the kibbutzim at that time in Israel. So, for example, Pesach, they used to bring a big sheaf of wheat, and it was another dance, and all the songs. And my father actually studied some singing in Milano. He studied like an opera singer. He used to sing. And Gary also studied in a conservatory in Milano whilst he was in Selvino. Gary lived in the garden. There was a hut in the beautiful garden that went in Selvino, and he and a Yiddish poet was also one of the counselors, if you want. So they lived together in this little hut. And Teddy was a real engineer, but he was always making things. He took photographs. He had a dark room. He used to develop all the photographs. And he used to tell the kids also that my mother always used to say it was like a Menschhausen, he used to told story about all his adventures in the army, and my father, that he saved my father's life and things like that, and the kids always used to love that as well. And he eventually went back to Israel. His parents lived in Haifa, and he was actually young. He cheated about his age, so he joined the British Army when he was 17 or something like that. So he was, but he came to Selvino and helped. And I got a photograph of in the summer. They always used to do big trips, walking trips to different places. The older children used to go hiking, and the children. So one year, my father and Teddy went with our group, Futsa Vav, in the mountain near thing, and it was in Pesach actually, because I got a photograph of a matzot. Our picnic was matzot, and we walked there. But one year we had a big camp in Bolyasco, and then I got some pictures of Bolyasco, and we had tents. We lived in tents, and they also cut. I remember they cut a round sort of ditch, so you could sit with your legs in the ditch all around. This was our table, so everything on Shabbat, everybody sat around and we Shabbat. And both Teddy and Gary were courting a pair of twins. They came from Poland, from Krakow, as we discovered later on. Very beautiful. They were 16-year-old, Miri and Shoshi. And when I think my mother was ill or something, she didn't go on this trip, or my brother was already born, I can't remember. So Miri and Shoshi looked after me, and we had a little tent just for 2 people, and I slept in the middle. And I remember Gary and Teddy used to buy them presents and take them out and so on. And eventually they married these girls, the twins. Gary married Miri and Teddy married Shoshi. And just last year we went to Krakow. We went to a music festival in Slovakia, but went via Krakow, and we went to one of the old synagogues, and there was a photographic exhibition. And there was the twins and their parents, and the brother. Now the brother was one of the Schindler workers. He worked for Schindler, and there was a photograph of him and Schindler in Tel Aviv years later. He stayed in Poland because the Russian, were already. Somehow they managed to get earlier. Miri and Shoshi was with a Catholic family, and she was looked after well. But Miri was sent to the friend of the father, who was a farmer, and they never let her into the house. She slept in the, in the field. And later on, she had TB. She probably caught it somewhere there. But anyway, at the end of the world, they got together and they came to Selvino. And the brother stayed in Poland for quite a while. And years later, he also made Aliyah and came to Israel. He was a dentist, as was, I think, their father was also a dentist. The mother was killed in the war. Anyway, so this was this wonderful place in Bolyasco. We went to the boat, and it was great. And the festival, people used to come from Milano. A lot of people used to come. I used to be the tourist guide. Whenever Israelis, people from Israel used to come, and I used to show them around. And what else? There was one episode which was memorable. I think at that time lived with my parents. There was an Austrian girl, very beautiful, tall, long, blonde, plaits, and her mother. Her mother was very. I think she had a non-Jewish father. Anyway, the mother helped with our group actually. In fact, I got a photograph of her with our group when we went on this trip. And she tried several times to commit suicide. And eventually, and I remember people came to our flat, which was at the top of the house, to say that she disappeared. So they, there was a group of the older children and some of the counselors went to look for her, and eventually they found her somewhere in the field, and she cut her veins. So they took her to a hospital in Milano, I think, or Bergamo, and she jumped from the roof and she killed herself. But the daughter, her father appeared when everything was sort of about to close, and she was supposed to go to Israel. Her father came and persuaded her. He lived in Austria, I think, somewhere, to go and live with him. She wanted to go with a group, they were very attached to him. Anyway, she went with him, and then she realized he only wanted a housekeeper, really, so she did come back to the... And the two, the brother and sister that the father took them to South America, came years later. We were living in Hadassim, and suddenly the brother arrived and he said, yes, we made Aliyah. They were Orthodox. When the building closed and we left, then went back to the kibbutz. We went via Atlit. Atlit was a big entrance, center where we had to be sprayed against lice and mice and this and that. Anyway, after 3 days we left and we went back to the kibbutz. But my father wanted to continue similar work with youth. And the kibbutz said, you've been already 5 years out of the kibbutz, now it's your turn to do the kitchen or do this. So at the end of that year, we went to Hadassim, which was a youth village, and he ran all the festivals and everything there. I went to school in Givat Brenner because our kibbutz didn't have a school, it was too small, so we used to walk to Givat Brenner. And in fact, I remember we came at the end of the War of Independence, and there was one siren. I remember we had to go to the shelters, and that was the end of the war. I remember before that there was an Arab village, or I don't know if they were Arab or settlers or settled there, or Bedouins, but I remember because the kibbutz used to have a fence, and every so often cows or something disappeared, and they also said it was these people. And then when we came back, they were gone. So they left or were made to leave, I don't know, probably to Gaza, but they were gone. But my father did a lot of work even before Servino outside the kibbutz, because next to, very close, we were close to the Rehovot, but next to Rehovot there was a small, it wasn't exactly a village, but maybe a suburb of Rehovot, which was an agricultural sort of town of Yemenites, came from Yemen before the state. And he used to teach all the kids. I got a photograph of him with Yemenite children.
Such a complex word, complex.
But then when he was in North Africa, when they were in Egypt, he went to the ghetto in Cairo and he taught the children songs from Israel and so. The same in Libya. So he did a lot of this stuff. He used to go into the community
and maybe in Givat Brenner you knew
Sereni.
Of course, Sereni and the Castel Bolognesi. Castel.
I know who they are, but I don't remember meeting
which
them.
are her relatives.
Really? Okay. Well, of course, Elsa Sereni was there.
Yes.
But we used to walk there and back. They used to have Givat Brenner was one of the biggest, all the biggest kibbutz. So they used to have plays, and so they had a big hall there for. And then we moved to Hadassim. Hadassim was also started. It was called Hadassim. It was financed by Canadian Witzel, which was called Hadassah. They called it Hadassah, and through Aliyat Noah, they gave money to build this place for orphans, also all Holocaust orphans. So a lot of them were. There was a husband and wife who were she was the head of the school and he was the head of the village. He ran like a village, and this headmistress, I remember her coming to Chile to interview my parents before moving to Hadassim. And Hadassim at that time started from 3rd grade. They didn't have 1st, 2nd, 3rd. They only had 3rd grade children at that age, and I just finished 1st grade. So, and there was a nearby village that Kadima, that they had a small school, but my parents, I was the only child of that age, so my parents didn't want me to go separately by myself. So they sent me in the summer holiday to my aunt, who was a very well-known teacher in Kibbutz Ayelet HaShachar in Galilee. And she always used to teach 1st to 3rd grade. And always people used to call her children the philosophers of Rivka. She was my father's sister. She was older than him, and she studied to become a teacher in Poland, in Lvov. And she was sent. She was like a hired teacher in the kibbutz, but eventually she became a member. And her husband was a carpenter from Iraq. He was self-taught. His family walked from Basra to Jerusalem at the beginning of the century. And he was a very, very red communist. Very red. The Communist Party was outlawed during the mandate. So he was in the kibbutz. They married. They had one son that disappeared. And but during the mandate, he used to go from one kibbutz to another, hiding from the authorities. He was quite an activist, but eventually, actually, even joined the British Army himself. But so I went to Ayelet HaShachar for about 6 weeks or whatever holiday, and learned 2nd grade with my aunt. So when I went to Hadassim, I went into 3rd grade. So I skipped 1 year and I went to 3rd grade. So I was always the youngest in the class, but Doda Rivka, my aunt, taught me, and I then knew some of the children. But Kibbutz Ayelet HaShachar was in the mall. All the children, I remember when we arrived to Israel, they were in Haifa because they were all evacuated during the War of Independence, because the north was quite, there were Kauji and lots of marauding irregulars, so they evacuated the women and the children to Haifa. And their second son, Avrami, was born December. Well, no, he was born. Anyway, he was born in '49. So he was there. He came back. 48. My brother was 47. He was 48. Yeah. And that's it. And then we moved to Hadassim.
And you moved away from Israel when?
I moved away when I was 25,
And
24 and a half.
here?
No.
No.
No, I went with Luigi.
Yeah.
So what happened was, I went to the army a bit late because I was too young to go, and my parents signed that they allow me to go when I was 17 and a half, so I went to the army. Not when most of the high school graduates go, but a bit later. So most of the people in my cohort in the army were, I don't know, hairdresser, secretary, and so they didn't finish high school. Anyway, I went to the communication school in the army, and then I went to the Air Force. I was in the Air Force for 2 years.
Okay. But let's switch back to Selvino.
Selvino, but it's
was-
connected because when I studied my masters, Luigi and Amarie came as they did a mini sabbatical in the Weizmann Institute, and that summer we did a big reunion of all the Selvino children, and Luigi and Amarie came as well, and I told him that it's finishing. I think he said, when you finish, you come and work with me in my laboratory in Boston. And that's how I got to Boston, and that's how I met my husband in Boston.
Wow.
We married there, so that's why I said. But I was almost like a daughter there, because they always, every weekend they used to go traveling. I always used to go with them, and they entertained. They knew all the famous, Nobel Prize winners. Ephraim Pachalski-Katzir was president later. He was guest. They always guest, and I was with them. I was always had dinner with all these Jacob and Monod and all sorts of people. And, lots of. So I was, and I married in their garden. We married in their garden.
We have a nice little video of Luigi and Amarie on the computer.
Yes. Yeah. So that's a connection.
How old was your father, Moshe, when he reached Selvino? You know?
Selvino, my father was born in 1914, so he was 28.
He went
No,
there in...
He went to the army. I was born in 42. It was
32.
30 something.
Yeah.
And your mother? When?
My mother was born in 1920
Where?
in Cologne, in Germany. And her parents were sort of assimilated. They used to go to synagogue, but not very much. And her father's family had a wholesale meat business. And he was one boy and 7 girls, I think. And my grandmother also big family from Hamburg. And my mother, she had a cousin who was the same age almost, and they were treated like twins. But her cousin, her on the mother's side, he was in the Zionist movement. He was, they called them the Maccabi and the young Maccabi. And so when Hitler came, my mother was in a Hochschule, but she had to leave Hochschule and go to, because they were a system like if you didn't want to go to university or wasn't academic, you studied 8 years, and that's it. But you went to Hochschule 11. So if you were academic, you went to the Hochschule, but she had to go back to a primary school and finish there, and all the teachers were old ladies who, But then she joined this Zionist group, and she was sent to on Hachshara to a sort of farm to learn on a farm, whatever. She was very good with her hands, so she had 1 year studying ceramics and things like that in a special school. And then Aliyat Noah, she was the second group of Aliyat Noah that went to Palestine, and they were sent to my father, to Kutzat Schiller. There were 40 of them from all over Germany, not only Cologne. Big group. And my father was her Hebrew teacher. And then obviously they stayed in the kibbutz. Her cousin also married a member of the kibbutz and stayed there. And she wanted to work with children, so she was helping first. But then they started. It was the first. They started the kibbutzim teacher training college, and my mother was on the first group that studied nursery teaching in Tel Aviv. My father at the time, and the kibbutz said, well, they didn't have money to pay, so I think they paid half. And her parents followed her the year when, Hitler wanted to get rid of the Jews before he wanted to kill them all. So they were able to leave with some furniture even and so on. They paid some money, but they left. So they came to Givatayim and they lived there. So her parents paid some of the money for my mother to be trained, and then she became the kibbutz nursery school teacher.
Do you know which was the communication tongue inside Salvino? Did you? Which
know.
was? Did they talk Hebrew or Italian
They talked a
or
lot,
Polish
not
or
Italian.
Yiddish?
There were very few Italian children. There was Nando, and mostly Yiddish, but they all learned Hebrew. Some were the older ones. Some went to Jewish school before the war. So, but most of the time Hebrew, because they were almost forced to be. They were taught Hebrew. Everything. The choirs were Hebrew songs. The teachers were Hebrew speaking. So there was a lot. But between themselves, they spoke a lot of Yiddish or Russian or Polish or Czech or wherever they came from. They came from all over, Hungary, different places. And some of them used to call, if there was 6 Shlomo, this one was a Hungarian, this one was a Czech, and this one, that's how they distinguished between them. And there are quite a lot of siblings that came together. There were 3 brothers came from Chelm. Chelm? Like the stories of the wise men of Chelm. Chelm was supposed to be very stupid people. And they came from Chelm, and there were 3 of them. One of the very, very, very famous teacher there, Devorah, she came from Israel, but she was from Chelm originally as well. And she was a friend of Ida Handel, who came from Chelm as well, the violinist. And she was a wonderful teacher, and people, they all loved her. And she went back, she married her.
He remembers very well.
Yeah. The mother was tall, and so they spoke Italian, of course, but they learned a little bit of, I don't know, but they lived underneath. There was sort of a room there, and they had all the animals there as well. And I remember one year I had scarlet fever, scarlatina. And they took all my toys and my books and everything, and they said we have to burn them because. And there was the big boiler, to heat the whole house and they said that's where they're going to take it, and it's going to be burnt in the thing. And a long time afterwards, I was playing hide and seek, and I saw through the window of this boy, and there were all my toys and all my books, and I couldn't get them, but they weren't burned; they were there. I remember very well. Yeah.
And the Gorini, they moved to he used to teach in Turin, Luigi Gorini, and
his father was a professor of botany. I think.
He didn't swear for fidelity to the fascism. And so
no, he was an anti-fascist, of course.
And so
and
he was
Switzerland and Italy, and
expelled from the university, and because of this he came to Milan and then to Salvino as a volunteer.
And then he and Anne-Marie went to France. They worked in France, Institut Pasteur. And then they were invited to go to New York, NYU, and then to Harvard. He to Harvard and she to MIT. And she was a professor emerita. MIT.
Yeah. Do you have relations with the family, the sons, of Luigi.
Not his, with the son, Daniel, yes. But Daniel was 6 when I came to, 5 or 6 when I came to Boston. And
he is still in Boston?
yes. Martin saw him last month.
Not when I was there.
Because I did a memorial from Anna Maria.
Anna Maria died
at
in
MIT.
94 in April of this year.
April.
April
Anyway,
of this
she
year.
died this year.
There
And
was
they
a memorial
organized.
service for a memorial event for her at MIT 2 or 3 weeks ago,
Yes.
and I was there.
And Danielle, although I used to write to her every year and so on, I used to speak to her on the phone, but she had Alzheimer in the end. She was, she lost it. So she had a carer, but she stayed in the house. And Luigi died in 76. And I remember I was in Israel. They went to Israel because he was already very ill then. He became, Chassid Umot HaOlam. And I remember I was there as well, and I arranged, because he was so ill, they went with the ambulance straight to the airplane and arranged to go through. That's it, I didn't see him after a year leukemia. And Anne-Marie lived, she was 94.
94.
She was born in 1918, I think. She was about a year and a half older than my mother. And she was an amazing woman, very charismatic and very, she used to, she taught in India. She used to go every year to the Himalaya, climb on the mountain. And she used to come often, on the way back, she often stopped with us in London, maybe our previous house. And we visited her maybe 3 years ago. We went to Boston, and she recognized me, but she said I forgot this. But she recognized. Because we married in a house, we married in the synagogue, but afterwards there was a party sort of on the ground in the garden, and it was a Sunday the 20th of August. And it just so happened we went to Tanglewood, where the Boston Symphony and the place. We went with my daughter, who already lived in New York then, and then that Sunday was 20th of August. So we went to Boston, we took a night out for me, but we went afterwards one more time. And that's that. Daniel has 2 children. And the second wife is Indian, and he's quite ill. But so now you will see photographs, right?
But if you remember talking about Salvino, what is your feeling? I mean, how were these years for you? Talking about.
Well, as I said, I was a bit ambivalent because my father almost rejected me, but. I loved the company. There were lots of children. There was lots to do. It was a wonderful place. I really loved it. And we used to go on these trips and so I'll show you. So here, this was the first winter when we arrived. You see, this was the last picture in Israel, so you can see more or less the same. This woman was Hungarian. She was one of the counselors. She was lovely lady. And this is our group. That's my mother. So I don't know, you can count. Let's see if I can count how many children. This one was this girl I told you, she taught me to speak. This one. This was Vovka. That's me. I can't remember the other name. Nando, I think this was Nando. Wait a minute. I think this was Nando. This one. That's my mother. And everybody used to go. There was a photographer in Salvino, and everybody used to all the clothes were sent from America, you know, we used to choose sort of second-hand clothes. That's a bit later. And have you been in touch with Umberto?
Miriam, yes, I'm in touch with.
Well, Umberto, I tell you how I connected with him again. It was extraordinary. My daughter lived then in Mexico City. Let's sit here and I'll sit in between you. You don't have to sit on the floor. I'll sit on here. My daughter was there, so I was looking on the internet, you know, to see if I got any mail. And I got quite a high sort of security thing. So every so often I look at my junk mail, and it was there. It said, I can't remember a name I didn't recognize at all. So this person want to be my friend on Facebook. I hate Facebook, so I was about to delete it. And then I looked at the subject, and he said, "I'm Umberto from Sciesopoli, Salvino." I think it was, you know, exactly 60 years. We left 48, December 48. This was 2008. Right? So I was so excited, you know, I had goosebumps, right? So I said, "How did you find me?" I don't know. So I wrote to him, and I said, it said Eleni something, because his wife is called Eleni. I said, "How did you find me? I haven't been there for nearly 45 years. I had a different name and all that." And I didn't even know if he was still in Italy or not, because I stayed in Italy for a bit. His family, he had 2 sisters. And I wrote, "I'm sitting in Mexico City writing to you," and And then he wrote back and he said, "I was in Mexico City 3 days ago," because his niece, grandson, I think, was bar mitzvah or something like that. So anyway, so I said, "I don't like Facebook, write to me." And then he sent me, I said, "You remember my brother was born?" He asked about my parents. I said, "They passed away." And he said, "You remember my brother was born?" So he sent me the whole, one of these pictures, I don't know, of me and my parents. Gary, there's Gary then. Anyway, one of these pictures with, here, this one. This picture, the whole screen was this picture. It's me, Gary, my mother, my father, and my brother. And that's the 2 of us. And that's in the book. My mother, you know, we were doing embroidery, so she was doing the pattern. This is the Boa, this teacher. This lady used to run, I think, all the clothes sort of store, and she was from Kibbutz Ma'aleh HaMisha near Jerusalem. Anyway, so, and then he sent me, for Rosh Hashanah, everybody used to have a picture on the stones, and there was a, you know, like a card, and it says, there's a sign of Salvino and the name, and Shana Tova and all that. So he sent me him, his sister, everybody was sitting on the stone. See, that's the gate. See, here, that's Umberto. That's him. This one, do you remember there was a big slope outside the thing, so we used to go on a sleigh, and you know, in winter. Here again on the stone, me and Vovka Partizan on the stone. This was a teacher who gave me the roll, so I stopped sucking my fingers. See, that's this Hungarian lady who used to work with my mother. This is our group, it's our love. And this is I don't know, on the stairs, the stairs that go up to Salvino. There's another picture. There's Bofka. This one, she was one of the girls, but she was helping us. And this is one of the trip, so I'm sitting on the mountain. This is when I already was living with my parents. That's Teddy. And this is my parents' bed. And I don't know if you remember, it was a big roof, open roof on the top. So, and our flat was on the top and open to this roof. So this one, sitting there, and I had a stamp collection. And here, I still collect stamps. I started then. I was 6. And this one was a trip that Teddy and my father took. Utsav Vav, you see, we're sitting like Vav. I'm walking. This is this woman who committed suicide. Here. And you see there's a box of matzot.
Walter told us about this one.
Yeah. And this is Batya. Her mother was working there. That's me.
Now it's quite different.
That's in Riccione. And that's Gary's mother with me at the beach. This one is a group of Israeli, and as I said, I was the tourist guide, so I was pictures with them. And it's Riccione. This one again, that's not on the stone, but next to it. There's a lot of this. It says winter 47, Pesach. You see, that's our group, and they have their own table. There's my father singing, Gary playing, singing. This one was this dance to cut the wheat. That's me. And this, my friend Khadija, was also in the group. That's Batya, this girl who was with my father. This one had always nice, so they shake like that. That's Vovka. That's me. That was his teacher. And it's Vovka. And on the walls, as you see, like החופש של הנאורים הנצחיים של האומה, זה sort of Zionist propaganda. This was the, again, emissary from Israel, and me, I was showing him around. There we go, sitting on the roof with my brother, Abner. And this was a bus, this was a group, we were all there to say goodbye to the people who left to go on to Palestine. Yeah. And these are the twins, Miri and Shoshi. You see? And they're not identical twins. That's the boy again, this teacher here. This one to Kaspa, he was a wonderful Hebrew teacher, and his daughter became a now his son, Yossi, I don't know, here's one of the pictures. Yossi Tukaspa was the other child, remained at the end. So it was Yossi, Umberto, and me. Now Umberto is probably a year or so older than me. And since then it turned out he lives in the States, we went to see him, he runs a horse, stables. Riding stables, and I took it out to show. Daniel.
And who was the photographer?
Teddy probably. I told you Teddy was doing photograph, and he was in the in a dark room. I remember going into the dark room, helping him. Now, my grandfather was killed when we were in Israel, in Servino. So my brother was called Avner, like memorial to my father. And he was born in Milano. Your brother. Yep. I remember there was a hospital with nuns, I think I remember nuns. And it was a maternity hospital, and on the door there was a blue or a red ribbon, a pink ribbon. If a boy, it was blue. And my parents, everybody from Italy, so many presents they got when he was born. Anyway, so that's Chag HaBikurim, that's me with the turkey and the chicken. And this is also in the garden. They had beautiful. And the garden was marvelous. It was so beautiful. And that was in the front. And that's where they used to do the parade in the morning in the front. Yes, this was I think Gary's little. This was a big after Bogliasco. I don't know if I got picture. Yes, I got. We went to Venice, and the other thing with this woman was a painter. She was me and Habiba. So this was all in Venice. Me sitting under the column in the middle of the square.